Joining us now to discuss our economic panel, Marc LoPresti is a senior market strategist and the CEO of Market Rebellion. Also with us is Tim Desher, executive director of Unleash Prosperity. Great to see you, gentlemen. I'm going to start with you here first. Marc, I haven't seen you in a bit. What's your reaction to these latest numbers?
Well, listen, this is unfortunately one of those good news, bad news stories, because while it's certainly good news that the American labor market remains strong and resilient, notwithstanding the impact of things like AI, which, as I've said to you guys before, is taking more jobs out of the market than the numbers would reflect. Despite that, the president's strong economic policy keeping the labor market on strong footing. Here's the bad news side of the story, because you might ask me, how could that possibly be bad news? It's bad news because it gives the Fed even more reason to be stubborn and keep rates where they are at the next meeting.
Right.
Very good point, Mark. And that was in the back of my mind. And many of Americans probably think the same way. But looking more closely at the jobs report, President Trump inherited an economy that was losing private sector jobs, while government payrolls, well, they were growing. But 1 year later, that trend has reversed. Another key point in President Trump's first year. Essentially, all net job growth has gone to native-born Americans, not foreign-born workers. The opposite of what happened under President Biden. I'm quite sure you noticed this trend, Tim. So what's your take on it?
Well, it was a great report, and I just want to just gently push back on Mark. He's a lot smarter than me, and definitely smarter than you, John. But what I will say, is that I want to say while jobs are being displaced by AI, there's a ton more that are coming from that as we continue to unpack all that AI can do for us, and as well as if you look at productivity and profits, we know profits drive a lot of the growth that happens in this economy. Those numbers are actually strong right now. So we are setting ourselves up for an incredible rebound, I think, this year. And already we had a great number yesterday. Look, private sector hiring up, government hiring down. It's the lowest number of government jobs since 1966, John, when you were working for Lyndon Baines Johnson in the White House, I'm sure. So it really is a great report. And if you look across the board there, you've got hiring in manufacturing, you got positive hiring in mining, you got positive hiring, big construction number, which means we're growing. And I think that that's a really good trend setting us up for, like you said, at the end of last hour, that big, beautiful bill is going to take effect here, and it's going to be good for the country.
Great points that you made, Tim. And you know what? Keep punching up. I can take it.
I'm staying out of this. A promise is made, promises kept. President Trump is following through on his commitment to lower energy prices. Here he is discussing policies that he credits with making energy costs affordable again.
Day one of this administration, I ended the war on coal. We terminated the Green New Scam, and we withdrew from the unfair, one-sided Paris Climate Accord. That was another beauty we had. We paid $1 trillion. Nobody else had to pay 10 cents.
Mark, talk to us about energy independence and how that has played into President Trump's outlook. Of course, he loves mentioning beautiful coal.
Yeah, well, listen, this is really part of an even bigger strategy that relates not just to energy independence, but to national security. Let's go back to AI for a second. And by the way, Tim, the check is in the mail for those comments about me being smarter than everybody else, but I have to fact check you there. John is not old enough to have worked for LBJ by any margin of error. But listen, the president recognizes that the consumption and the voracious demand for energy occasioned by the continued remarkable proliferation of data centers is going to put this country in an energy bind, an energy availability bind. And the president does not want to see us fill that energy void by having to rely on the importation of energy or natural resources for the production of energy, hence creating a national security issue. So this is it seems like an easy one. Let's bring the cost of energy down, affordability for folks down. The president's done that, but the strategy is much bigger, and it is a national security strategy, and we're winning because of the president's policies.
True, we're winning because the president is a natural businessman. And Tim, the way you look at the way President Trump moves, what he focuses on. He's looking at the American economy and treating it like one big business. Deregulation, looking at supply chains, looking at what our competitors around the world are doing, making sure there's a level playing field with tariffs. And last but never least, his policies on energy, common sense, bringing those prices down for the hardworking American. How do you see this?
Yeah, there's a couple things here. One, I don't think that maybe in the short term we're going to have some issues here, but really the ratepayers are the companies that are using these data centers. And they've said, we're willing to make the power plants. We're willing to build these. And as you saw in the executive order that President Trump signed recently, we're not only just going to put that energy into the certain data center, we're just going to dump it into the grid, which means it's going to bring prices down for everybody because the big ratepayer is going to be the people using the most of it. So you do have this element of it, which is good. But also you got to look at permitting. You got to look at regulations. When you can't get a pipeline built 100 feet under Lake Michigan to serve, 300,000 people, 55% of their energy needs, that's a permitting thing. That's political. That's the left standing in the way of getting productivity. And that's just one example. That's all over the country. So you gotta get rid of those barriers. You gotta get rid of the politics, and you gotta serve the need that we have at this time. And Mark's absolutely right. We need a lot of energy.
And that's how you get to affordability for the working class American.
Yeah. Well, speaking of politics, the stock market continues to climb, and the president is crediting one of his key policies for the gains. Let's watch.
We produced 50,000 in excess now, went up today, in excess of 50,000 at the end of my first year. So that's some difference. And that's because of tariffs. So we're doing numbers that nobody thought were possible. The economy is rich.
The president is crediting his tariff policies as why the market is doing so well, even as the House passed a measure yesterday to overturn his tariffs on Canada. What was your reaction to what we saw yesterday in the House, Mark?
My reaction was one of not surprising disappointment, particularly for the Republican lawmakers that broke ranks with the rest of their colleagues to vote again. This is not expected to pass, by the way. This is largely political theater. This is largely political midterm theater, guys. And unfortunately, we're going to see a lot more of this as we get closer to the midterms. And Republicans that are in battleground places like New York, New Jersey, where they are concerned, where they saw the outcome of the elections in November for mayor, for governor in those states going in a direction that is not good for those locations or for the country. So that's really what this was. Look, the big next thing on the horizon as it relates to the president's tariffs policies is that decision from the Supreme Court, SCOTUS as we like to call it, on the constitutionality of the president's use of the International Economic Emergency Powers Act to enact these tariffs to begin with. But this Canada story, it's a red herring.
Okay.
Interesting. Tim, I analyze those who push back from the right against, this act. The situation when it comes to Massey, Rep. Massey, when you look at Kentucky's #1 foreign export country destination is Canada. So I can see why he voted, the way he did concerning this bill, because he's voting in the interest of his local business individuals who look forward to continue to export into Canada without the rising cost of U.S. goods going into that country. So were you surprised at why, in the way certain people voted?
No, I think that it's a tough issue. Look, I'm a son of the great city of Detroit. Once great. I still think it's great, but it's a great city. And there's a relationship there with Canada that I'm going to have a nuanced takeover. And I do think that while Canada does have some policies that make it annoying for us to do trade with them, that border is extremely important to, I would say, one of the biggest battleground states in Michigan. There's a governor's race there. There's a Senate race there, and we need those seats. We need to have people on the right in control. Otherwise, we're going to have these problems with permitting, and like we talked about. And so, look, I think the Canada issue is nuanced, but I do think that we need to play that well, especially in an election year. So we aren't finding ourselves, alienating, 60 to 70% of an entire population of a city, populated city.
So true. And the thing is, Republicans need to rethink primarying Republicans who are in safe seats, because that money is better spent to maintain seats that are actually on the margin, because that's money well spent.